Now we're going to look at JavaScript, and the first thing that we want to do is load the content. So as mentioned in the earlier lesson, I do have an endpoint that I've set up, and this is actually going to be a custom one that's going to list out all of my course content. So the data within the data object, it's got a number of posts, and then the posts contain each different information about courses and so on. And then also within the main level, there's the pages, and if there's a previous page, it'll list it here and also list out the next page, so that I have a way to move through the various pages of content, and I'm going to load them chunk by chunk. So I'll load page by page, and this will vary per API. So first thing we want to do is set up the URL. So that's not going to change, and I'm going to set it up as a variable called just URL. And I'll make this a little bit smaller so we can see it. I know this is a fairly long URL, and this is coming from an apps script. So you can use the same one that I'm using. And if you go out into your browser and paste it, you're going to find that you get status, but the data is false because there's no data that's being returned because we haven't specified a page. And that's one of the parameters that this particular API is looking for, is that it's looking for a value. So let's create that, and we're going to create an object that's just going to be called val. And then this is what we're going to be updating in the various functions as we move through the various pages that are available within this particular API. So we want to set up a page value, and I'm just going to call it page. And this is going to be our starting page value. So we can start at page 1 because this is actually where the API is going to start. So the start page is 1. And next, we're going to create a function that's going to make the fetch request to the URL and return the content so that we can loop through the content and we can see it within the console. So let's create a function, and we can call it get courses. And so this will run right off within the root. And you could also have specific triggers that will load this as needed. And we're going to be updating this later on, that the trigger is going to be loading the course content whenever we do the scroll. So that's going to be, we're going to be customizing some of the functions. And that's why it's always good to wrap it within a function, because this is going to make it more flexible. So the get courses function, and setting up fetch request. So let's build the base URL for the fetch request and set up that. And this isn't actually going to change once we set it. So we'll just call it the base URL. It's going to use the value of URL and then concatenate the question mark equals and question mark page equals, and then whatever the page value is that we want to load. And that's connected within the val object under page. So that will provide us a base URL that we can work with. And next, we're going to create the fetch request. So we're using fetch instead of the XHR request. You can also do this with the XHR request, of course. So using fetch, and this is promise based. So we're returning back our response value on this promise. So returning back a response. And when we do get the response, we're going to use the JSON, the response JSON, and send that to the next promise, and that will be then. And now we're going to have it within a usable format where we've got it as a JSON value that's being returned in a usable format. And for now, we'll just console log out the contents of JSON to make sure that we've done the connection properly and that everything is working as expected. So refresh the page, and we're not going to see anything yet within the web page, but if we open up the console, and that's down here at the bottom, I am using Chrome, so this is a dev tool within Chrome. And if you're not familiar with the console, you can always open that up within the More Tools developer tools, and there's different shortcuts for Windows and for Macs. So see, we get return back an object. So this is representing the JSON content, and within that object we've got a status of 200, we've got data of a number of different posts, and then we've got the pages. So we're only looking to get back the contents that are contained within JSON data object. So let's do a quick refresh, and now we see we've got the posts, which is what we're going to loop through. And the pages are going to indicate if there's additional content to be loaded, and if it is available to load. Then we know that when we're scrolling, we can continue to load more content as long as there's a next page. And if next is null, then we have to stop loading content. So we have to be mindful of that fact. So once you've set up your fetch request and you've got access to the data, and you can also open it in the browser just to see that you are getting the data, and it'll be the same thing that you're returning back within the console. You're going to be ready to move on to the next lesson. We're going to make use of this content and we're going to write it into the web page. So that's still to come in the next lesson.